Okay, folks, we are on to I don't know how much there's so many good phrases for pounding their little behinds. We're talking about discipline, and it's the peace that true discipline comes with, that the world has reacted against it. Christians end up hiding from the authorities like they were Jews in Holland in 1940. Just an embarrassment. My relatives who lived in England for years, they called spankings time out because their child protective services would call on houses and interview your children without you present to find out if you spanked your children. And if you did spank your children, they'd remove your children from you. So they are now in the United States, 2 blocks away. But they did not find it easy. Davis and Manisha in New York, same thing. Row houses, you had to pick some part of your row house that was far enough away from the walls on either side so the neighbors wouldn't hear your kid yowling to the heavens for the just punishment that fell on them. Because people would report you.
And they called it trouble.
They got called it, trouble.
We got in trouble.
So we've got to sort of, let's just say we're kind of probably all on board with some kind of discipline for the child. But looking at some elements of it, it's about why. And we don't often go, okay, why do we do this? Why do we hit them on the bottom till they cry? Is it a discussion? Is that what you're engaged in? They don't quite get the discussion aspects of this, so you're going to give them a Indian burn until they understand how much you don't like it. It's something a little bit more basic. You are a being in the first. One of the reasons AI is never going to happen. I swerved there, didn't I? AI is never going to happen, no matter what our techno geeks here think, because you can't make a machine that will hurt and will enjoy. It has no means of knowing its valuation or its presence in the world, because nothing happens to it that matters. Because when you came out of the chute, you didn't know anything. And without asking you, the chaos of sensation started to happen to you. Because all of your senses, your eyes, your ears, your touch, what else is there? Hunger. All those things just started happening to you. You got a diaper rash and you cried. And that woman picked you up. She keeps coming in, smiling at you, and if you smile back, she'll pick you up. You start to figure out what's going on because of the sensation. Now, you might claim that a machine can sense something. It can't. It can record something. It can record something on command, and it will see, but it will never perceive. Now, when you see now, you feel just general things. I'm touching this table, and I have a sensation of touch, but it has no importance to me. I know the table's there. That's about it, but it's not really important. You're a, if you're familiar with Descartes' cogito and his I think, therefore I am. Noble work, Descartes, but what's it called? The Eventine cogito is I feel, therefore it matters. When you have a feeling that reaches a certain intensity of agony or ecstasy, suddenly those things matter, and they only matter to you. No one else has ever felt your headache the way you feel your headache. You can't communicate how you feel your headache. You can't say, how much does it hurt? About 17. And they have no idea what you mean. They don't even know colors that you see the way you see them. We're just kind of guessing. We see them the same way, but it's difficult. Something as simple as that. Pleasure, pain, they are identifiers of a self existing in the universe because no one but you feels it. And you are the only one and existed as the only one who feels it. So this signal makes the sensations of pleasure, we'll get to that affection issue next session, but discipline is the administration of pain to bring, because their life has only issued them pain and pleasure in a disordered phenomena, you as the parent start to do things in an ordered way so that when they're in their crib crying, when they're supposed to be sleeping, Leslie would walk in and she'd open the door and you said, "You're being bad. No, stop it." And she would shut the door and leave them. All they got from mom was a stern lecture. And they very quickly figured out how to sleep through the night. This is not working. Where I could give a good feeling, pick them up, comfort them, try to get them happy about where they are and put them back down and wait for them to scream again. So when we are doing things, we're stepping into the disorder of life itself to try to bring order by affection and by discipline to their sensations so they have an adult structuring the phenomena. When we have a gas stove, and the gas stoves, well, just yesterday, Ezra, found my blowtorch lighter. Luckily, it was on lock, but he could have burned the house down. Now, I remember one of my grandsons, I was sitting on the porch, I had electronic lighter, gas butane lighter, and he was crawling around on the stone out there, and this is Ian, and and I had the lighter, and I looked at the lighter, I looked at him, looked at the lighter, and I said, there's no way he's going to figure that out. I turned my back, he had it figured out in 3 seconds and burned himself. He's brilliant, but the pain will come at you. Now, what you want as a parent is them not to touch the gas stove, no matter how charming the flame looks. So what you do is you slap their fat little hand, which takes an ordered, a measured situation. Don't want them doing that. Let's add pain to the word no about that, and they start to measure their world. You value your world like AI can't because of the pain and the pleasure. And when the pain and the pleasure comes in a structured way, they're able to, you might say, codify or file system it, and they know this is not what I want to have happen. Pain is usually chaotic. Parental discipline is not chaotic. It's ordered. When in Proverbs we have there's a lot of, the Bible doesn't ever talk about spanking your little kids. We do it because we're evangelicals, and that's kind of Dare to Discipline by Dr. Dobson. And I'm for it. But the Bible talks about the rod of reproof. He's probably talking about at least a 13, 14-year-old boy getting beat with a broom handle. Okay? That's what people use. That was the Roman system of lictors. They would carry the fasces, the bundle of rods that they beat people with. Okay? The rod of reproof was probably something that was going on more like you see a Mexican being beaten by his mom with a slipper. An adult child taking it in the... I'm sure John can tell you stories of that sort of... but we don't have a lot of verses. But the verses that we do have, 29:15, the rod of reproof gives wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. Now that's what you have when you don't have controlled pain, controlled pleasure. You get pleasure in accident. Then the child decides what they do to avoid the pain and to gain the pleasure. They will start chasing candy. They will drink too much pop. I ate a whole tube of Crest toothpaste at camp because I couldn't get my hands on any candy. And I still sweat and flinch a little when I see Crest toothpaste. Left to himself brings shame to his mother. And it was in Canada, and my mother was Canadian, and I did bring shame to my mother. Discipline your son, and he will give you rest. He will give delight to your heart. You're doing something that has, if you want to think of it this way, it's the intervention to what is. You are just being a part of the circle of life. Life will be doing this to them. Life will do it accidentally. Okay? Or life will do it according to them, what they pursue. And if they pursue it themselves, left to themselves, it will all be immature choices. But you're participating in what will be. God has designed you to feel things and evaluate because you feel things, and then decide on your evaluations what you're going to do. Now, this kind of behavior is, it's law and order in your home. You don't have to, you have house rules, you have safety rules, you have maybe moral code rules that you lied to your mom, you're getting a spanking. Something, don't touch the outlet, you're getting a spanking. I don't know what other kind of rules. Don't take your shoes off.
That was mine.
That was...
Because we had unfinished wood floors on the second floor, and there were spots where big splinters had entered our children's feet. And so I made a rule for my kids, they were not allowed to be in the house with their shoes off because I didn't want to deal with that, pulling out splinters.
Well, that kind of made it a safety thing, but
yeah.
I just want them to be civilized. People still ask, do we take shoes off here? Like the Japanese are more civilized than we are. They're not. We're America. We keep shoes on.
And I also didn't want to have to go looking for shoes when it was time to go out somewhere and, in the car and they needed to have their shoes because we had a huge house and those shoes could be anywhere. And sometimes one here and one over there or different floors. So yeah, it was my rule because of how it brought order to what I was trying to accomplish.
Right. You have that range of, some is the spiritual order of the home, some of it is the safety order of the home, some of it is the preferential order of the home. But you're establishing signals into their life by which they make their decisions. And you're creating, I was thinking about this the last few weeks as we were going through our materials, new ideas come on, and I've been fighting the neo-Judaizers for years. And in Galatians, it speaks of the law as a custodian to the Jews. It wasn't sonship. It wasn't the freedom we have in Christ. It was custodial. And in a way, you raising your children are raising them in the same way as the law held the people of Israel. You have rules. They reflected God and standards and expectations for the nation on these different areas. Some of them were health. Some of them were just pattern. And you've got that privilege, and you want to shape something that one keeps you might say, the order of the home the way you want it, at the same time, like the custodian of the law, was waiting for the Son, waiting for the gospel to come. And at that point, to hand it off naturally to the people of faith who were well raised by the law. They weren't caught up in the Pharisee, Sadducee, persnicketyness about the rules. They were yearning, like Paul was. He loved the law of God with his inmost being, but he could not do it. So you're actually preparing something in the same way the old covenant prepared the world for the new covenant. Because at some point, that well-adjusted kid, the custodial time was valuable, just like my time in the military, valuable for me. Some kind of strict regimentation of what I did with my time. and they would tell you when you had to do it. Those things are healthy for the child's humanity. And then if you do this right, positioning the gospel and Christ and God and morality where it should be, they end up at their earliest possible convenience. When their mind is mature enough for the gospel, they can respond to the gospel. So bear that in mind. So you're structuring the normal pain pleasure response of identity, and that's in nature, and you're just stepping in as someone who knows how to drive this car, and you're going to give them the signal. Now, some parents they're constantly giving things to their kids of wanting to please, either placating them or involved with them. They would rather buy something out of the child than have the child be given the requisite pleasure and the requisite pain, because they really fear the pain will cause your children to hit and be violent, or teach them to fight, that it's okay to hurt somebody. I mean, you know perfectly well that you're not trying to, you don't hand your kid a switchblade and you get your switchblade out and you're going to, it's time to get down with it. You know that when you spank, you're trying not to wound them. You're not trying to injure them. You're trying to sting them, because it's the pain that gets the attention. It is the pleasure that gets the attention. Now, when it talks about discipline in Hebrews, about your parents, it says in Hebrews 12:10, "For they disciplined us for a short time at their pleasure." That's exactly so. You've got to be confident of your own standards. That's why thinking about all the categories, perceiving correctly, knowing how you make decisions, because you're going to discipline at your pleasure. And it's going to, not only your kids going to reflect you, your kids are going to reflect your kinds of decision-making powers. Are you actually very wise? And it's not always the disciplining parent that is doing the damage. It's, again, these placating parents or over-involved parents. So what you please, you better have a argument for. We said earlier, they're here, and discipline is so that they don't disrupt the adult life as much as possible, because they've entered in as super immature, and you're trying to still get life done, and you're still trying to go to work, still trying to have a life. Keep your mind, and you're doing this to bring order for them and for you. But you get to I have a few things here on page 17. Schedule, spoiling, eating. That these are areas where have manifest benefits in getting a disciplined pattern for how you schedule an event. You want to be able to get out the door efficiently. Some of it's going to be how you schedule you. Don't expect your child to face discipline for your lack of planning, because you can't get the family out the door because you're annoyed that the baby bag isn't ready. Well, you didn't get it ready when you came home last time, so quit looking at your kid like they spoiled your afternoon because you were late because the baby bag had to be restocked with diapers. You did that. You do the right thing. You know how to open the door and talk sternly to them about them not sleeping. You say, I know that scheduling, and many mothers will testify, that if they could have a cup of tea without a child around, it could just be heaven. It just could be heaven. Well, control of the schedule is exactly that. Someone who figures out, I'm going to get my kid to sleep through the night, because it takes discipline to do that, of you and the kid. It might not be spanking discipline because they're only like 4 days old. You can't go in there and hit them. So But knowing that how much gain you get, laundry-wise, cooking-wise, because you have told the kid, this is your playtime. We've decided 2 hours in your room every afternoon, and you're looking forward to those 2 hours like nobody's business. But decide what you're making, realize what will be really enjoyed by the kid. They got 2 hours of play in the room or out in the yard in the summer or whatever it is, and then they get 2 hours of craft time with mom, whatever you're doing with it, or maybe 15 minutes. Because craft time with children is not craft. Now these are things, they're just arenas in which discipline comes in so that you can structure something as important as your schedule, because your peace and your comfort will be heavily affected by schedule. Spoiling, the comment next to it, discipline is administered so as to make them gratifying to you, not vice versa. You're trying to make them comport themselves with you, not the reverse. When people go the reverse direction, then spoiling becomes the path because they're trying to get into the kid's good graces and not having the child think, I need to be in my parents' good graces. You just, which way you frame the question, which way you frame the decision. And if one of the temptations is money. What was that? Was it my stuff or yours?
It was mine.
One of the temptations is money. We live in an affluent society, and some of you are professionals. And we were in the ministry, so we didn't have this option, but we watched professionals. And professionals, it's amazing. They you bury those kids in stuffed animals and whatever else, It's tempting. Since you can, you often will. And it does. You just have to decide what's too much. Your grandparents are probably too much, but maybe you're doing it just right. But that's the pleasure end of it. You're giving something enjoyed to the kid, but you also want to watch that dipstick in that arena as to whether they're not valuing anything of it because it's like breathing to them. Or it's a debt you have to pay. If you go into the toy store, you had better buy a toy. You're not walking out in the calm of human reason. So be aware that those things are points of disruption. And the third thing is on eating. We notice this in a lot of families. We've noticed that families coming over for dinner, visiting families, our own kids. It's a tussle of will at dinner time. And there was, we've had a wonderful set of stories. Davis, his devout, obedient child, who did not like Leslie's oven omelet. And we would have it sometimes for dinner. And he was facing this with nobility.
Oh, he was sitting in a booster chair. I mean he was that
young.
little.
But he took some of the oven omelet and he ate it. And then he turned to Leslie and said, Mother, thank you for the oven omelet. And then he threw up all over the table. Now, he was trying to be noble, trying to do what Jesus would want him to do. But we wished he had stopped earlier. But so you have to say, okay, what would I do in the situation? One, we never made him eat oven omelet again. We learned some things about how far you could take it. Or the kid who refuses to eat the Brussels sprouts or whatever it is. And then this is a knockdown thing on discipline. He's disregarding the parent's authority. And you're going to eat that tonight or you're not going to bed. Or if you're going to bed, we're going to put it in the fridge. You're going to eat it for breakfast in the morning. I don't know if you ever ran across it or you did those sort of things to your kids because you're an awful human being if you did. And we realized with Graham was the sinner in this situation. He would have difficulty with certain foods, just would not eat them, just didn't eat them. And we would, the father told you to eat, 5 bites of that. Well, Oh, off to the bedroom, spanking, back in the chair, doink. Eat 5 pieces of the thing, and then you can go. Not eat it. Off to the bedroom. It became abuse. Not because we wounded him, but there was no foreseeable end to this. I would be up all night, hauling him out of a chair to spank him for not eating the 5 bites of whatever it was. We realized that some other areas we had been aware of, that your kid did something, and then you go, did you do, and they did it. You just say, I'm going to add a lie to the charges against them, because I'm going to prompt them to lie to me. When I said, you did this, I'm punishing you. Not, did you do this? Because they're going to say no. They're going to lie. Then you got to deal with that. So sometimes you're causing, by whom the sin comes. Because if the child has been disciplined for not eating, they've been punished for not eating, and you've added their disregard of your command to eat, like umbrage was taken on your part, and that's never going away. You could throw away the Brussels sprouts. Just chuck them. Send him to bed. He'll be hungry in the morning for whatever he has to eat. You paid the price for the not eating. Are you going to have them do that little dance again? You're not adding peace to the household. Something goes wrong in that exchange of power and demand and whether there's obedience. Some people think, well, they've got to learn to do what their father says. Well, the father has to learn to be wise in what he says and not know, because he does not know how the child... I did not know how Davis felt about oven omelet. Throwing up convinced me. Now, because how could I know that he really didn't like it that much? I actually had a Brussels sprout last night. They haven't improved. My wife loved them, and I said, well, I got to remember whether this is as bad as it was. I'm an adult. I'm 70. I should try it out one more time. And they did not sell well. Now, so you don't know, because you only feel what you feel. You don't feel what your child feels. And on things like eating, it's much easier to convince them to eat when they're hungry. It's much better to learn what they enjoy eating so they're pleased with you when they have the task of eating in front of them. When you are... I had a bubble here from Leslie. Was that something you wanted to say?
I already said that.
Oh, you said that? Okay, we're on to the next page, which is page 18. We talked about that proverb that says, or the Hebrews thing, that they disciplined us for a short time at their pleasure. You're the one that has to justify your pleasure. You've got the right that doesn't make you right. Okay? You've got the right to decide how your household runs. You got to live with how your kids responded to it, and you got to live with how people look at you when they visit you. Well, that's just awful. If your kids are going to bed, I know it's 3:30 in the afternoon, but year-round you're going to bed at 3:30. You will sleep till 10. You've got to be complete. You got to be complete in what you please, and you've got to have an argument for yourself. Not you have to prove it to other adults, but you need to have a case made. And if you have a bad case, remember the image you set up and the image that they're going to be able to tease out. They're on the ground looking at you like nobody else is looking at you. They're almost as close to you as they need to be to really understand who you really are. And when you're ignorant or stupid, you're going to sell ignorance and stupidity. And they have 2 options. 1, mimic you and just be the worst human being that everybody ever got to know, ignorant and stupid about all things. Or they realize that you were ignorant and stupid, and they live in such a way that punishes you for being ignorant and stupid. They either become a prig, or they become just, some pissant kid that can't seem to not disrespect his parents. but you're giving them something to disrespect, and they either become that disrespectable themselves. Now, you also have to say, just as a warning, a lot of people talking about culture war, a lot of people, trying to create cultures that very consciously, watch out for that, because you're really not equipped. Just like the federal government is not equipped to design a financial system, you are not equipped to make a culture. Cultures happen. You can participate. It's best if you participate. It's best if you see the things that are natural to you and not try to come up with some sort of self-designed family culture that covers all the bases. What's the phrase? You're not smart enough or good-looking enough to do that sort of thing. We understand culture. Lewis has a great essay, if you want to read it, Lilies That Fester, and it's about people who try to create culture that they think will benefit people. And it creates what he calls the cherry autocrats, the managerial class mixed with the do-gooders. People who are doing things for your good. And parents sometimes decide they're the managerial class in your family, and they've got some idea what's going to do you good. And you got that obligation, but watch out that you're not trying to make something too much of a cultural issue rather than enjoyment, or play certain games because you enjoy them, not because you want to have this. You saw one family, they played Balderdash every year at Christmas time, and wouldn't we have a cool family if we did that too? And all the kids are backing towards the door because they've played Balderdash with you, and you're a retard. So we have a basic thing that we are faced with doing. We stop stupid. We punish evil. We strive to be free of injustice and various things that that come on you about injustice. We have a long-held embarrassment where we punished our eldest for something our second eldest did. He still remembers that. Went into law for that reason, I think. So he at some point can sue me. But it was a blot on our action. We did something we did not have proof that he had done it, and there was nothing he could say. Because you presume your child's lying to you, and so when the innocent tells you he's innocent, he's lying. And those are things that violating justice is a huge thing that a parent should take on themselves and admit to their child and seek the forgiveness of their child if they do it. I had one phone call from a guy years ago that said, my son did something. I know he did it. He knows I know he did it. He knows I can't prove he did it. Do I punish him? I said, don't punish him. He knows you can't prove it. So he knows you're acting by nature unjustly if you punish him, because you can't demonstrate it. And that would teach him more about you and injustice than it would teach about justice. And if he gets away with it, no one gets away with anything. God is judge of the living and the dead. Everybody pays for everything everybody did. So we're just trying to order the situation here, and an injustice done, our son will still jokingly remind us of our having violated his rights. And I tell him there are no rights. But he doesn't believe me. He's a lawyer. What I wanted to get to, this is sort of a general goods. It's really the age-appropriate discipline section. This is the fun part. I like this topic. Well, for the first stage is scheduling, letting them cry. You're not punishing them. You're just not rewarding them.
Speaking sternly.
Speaking sternly.
Phrases that you repeat so they start to get this sense of, I keep hearing that word.
And they're not picking me up. So you have to discipline yourself in most cases because the child is dying in there. And But that's your first step into discipline. The firm declaration is then added so that they begin to hear certain words like no attached to the swat, that the thigh and the hand swats that come onto it, adding pain to the no and to stop it. They're getting an image of you, and they're getting an image of what's just barely an image of what's coming, which is the full butt apocalypse. That's when, and this is Leslie always recommends that gets decided on the changing table, because what a great moment. There they are. But
our kids always got their first spanking on the changing table for trying to roll over, squirming. And I just thought, nope, we're not going to have this. They're going to learn to lie there and get changed without thinking they're cute and funny by squirming all over. So,
and the butt's open, and
hold still.
Hold still, pow. And now, the full butt apocalypse has its range, of course. That initial swat on the butt, you're not even using a utensil usually, which grows into a true spanking that is, I'd say, pick a number and always use it. You don't want to have any negotiation potential. If they spotted you had a different number of swats for this than that, then they will appeal for that. Or if they just notice that mom and dad are different in their caliber, they were pleading, let mother spank me all the way down the hall, because she doesn't have the follow through. She doesn't look to the next county to loft your kid. And so we picked 10, the ripest and juiciest, 5 for each cheek. Doesn't matter what you did. If you're getting a spanking, you're getting that. That was just a set, and it just for sting. You always watched out for any kind of bruising. You're not looking for vengeance. If you think vengeance rather than punishment, you're in the wrong. You need your heart corrected by God, because you're not to avenge yourselves. You're supposed to leave that to the wrath of God. Because once we step into the passion of vengeance, wanting our right and the wrong done to us or the disruption in my life poured out on the child, rather than, I don't want them disrupting anymore, so I'm going to give them a lesson about disruption. That's just something that you've got to very much, and the number and those patterns are helpful because you're not a runaway spanker. Some people ask, do you spank for repeat offenses in the spanking? Not a fan of that. I don't think it's wrong necessarily, but be very wise about what violation that they, under torture, violated, okay? They're getting nailed, and they're squirming, and you're saying, no squirming or you get another spanking. Then they really flip out because they're looking at 20 swats ahead. And so you might be saying, I might be asking for a performance in the midst of a discipline that I can't expect. But if a child did something other that wasn't merely a expected kind of result of facing a spanking, squirming, crying, whatever. If the child got a spanking and then turned around and swore at you, yeah, you're getting another one, Skippy. That's not good. So a lot of it is you having a case that you could make that you are not exasperating your child. It says parents do not exasperate your children. Do not provoke your child to anger. We know that harshness it tells husbands not to be harsh with their wives. That means exceeding in discipline that which is right and just. So you've got to be obedient to not exasperating or angering. You've got to not exceed. You need to know what you're doing, and you always got to be in control of what you're doing. Now,
before you move on to the next stage, Evan, If you perceive that you're having a discipline problem, an inability to control your child the way you want to when you go out in public, and that could be a church, it could be the grocery store, it could be to friends' houses. You need to start doing some home prep to train your child so that they know how to be out in public, so you're not having to do that discipline out in public. So things like you want your kid to be quiet at church, you don't want him to be running at church or in any other large building, because that's the first thing they walk into a big building and they see lots of empty space, they just want to run. You got to prep them for that. Or asking for things at the grocery store. You know, they're in the cart and there's so many temptations, every aisle, you know. You have to prep them ahead of time by saying, we're going to be going to thus and such a place. I don't want you to do this, whether it's asking for toys, candy. I don't want you to run. I don't want you to yell and make noise. And then you have to remind them as you're getting ready to go, you're getting in the car, and then you remind them again when you're getting out of the car. But if that all is still not yielding the fruit, then you got to do a practice at home where you put them in front of those things and you say, we're not going to, you know, if you do that, you're going to get a swat. If you grab it, whatever. You just figure out some way to put them through the paces at home. There was a woman at our church who had a bunch of kids, and they were really difficult for her. She was all alone. And I just suggested, why don't you have your kids all sit at home and say, you all have to be quiet until this timer goes off. And if you're quiet until the timer goes off, you're going to get a Skittle or, you know, something that they might really want. It doesn't have to be candy. And then you just sit there, and it doesn't have to be very long. You start them maybe with 2 or 3 minutes, and then you increase it so that they learn. Then you go to church and say, while we're here, you need to be quiet. Those kinds of things. And that's, again, if you're finding you're having problems. Onward.
And so you create the pattern of life, that which benefits you, brings order and peace to it, and then you figure out, you know, asking your friends, older people, how they've done it, what did they do to get kids to obey in church. The next phase of this is a development, because the kid, you were strong, you were stern, you scheduled them, you said no, you said stop it, you then started to swat their hand, and oh, please don't be, you know, ladyboys about this. I see people going, I want to step across the room and just pelt them in the face and just say, that's what it feels like to be disciplined. Pain has to happen. But I digress. Then the full butt apocalypse, which has its own structure. Believe me, these little bastards, they figure some path out. They've figured something out. They've found a way to sustain their own interests, dodge the hard and fast rule, and manipulate you to not be doing what you were wanting to do in discipline with them, where they started to be more and more disobedient, and it became harder for you to step in. They realized all I have to do is disobey all the time. They will not discipline me all the time, so I'll just disobey all the time. And pretty soon they will start, their regime will start falling apart. Well, the parent suddenly realizes, little Johnny got my number. I need something. This is where you being bigger than little Johnny comes in handy. And as Doug, my brother, often says, if you don't like what your kids are doing, make them stop. It's really actually pretty direct. Now, this is the thing we call the reign of terror. The reign of terror is not to punish them more or harder, but to divest them of any hope that they got this under control. That's the basic thing. They're adroit at sin. They're crafty, like the serpent. And you're looking to, with the antidote, is to stop this kind of disobedient displeasure you have in your children at home. You have to have unexplained, unwarned, without discussion before, during, or after, for every infraction, bare bottom, full butt, full complement of the ripest and juiciest. Where that suddenly they're just, not, without them, you talking to them, do you know you did something wrong, Johnny? And they've got that worked out. They've heard that. Yes, I do, Father, and I'm really sorry. No, you're not. So I'm not going to talk to you about this. You're just disappearing with Father for a few minutes. Where I'm not going to explain what just happened to you. I'm not going to tell you what you did wrong. You're going to know what you did wrong, but you're going to want my explanation because that was one of the threads you grabbed and tried to unravel me with. And during it, you're not going to get an explanation, and afterwards, we're not going to talk about it. I know you want to say, this hurts me more than it hurts you. I know that you parents want to say, but we really love you. Don't say any of that. This is the reign of terror. They're supposed to be weeping in their sleep over what happened in this household. They lost control of the narrative. And I say this with such authority because the last time we had the seminar, 9 years ago, there was a young couple who came to it whose child was hell. We got to observe how hellish the child was because
he was like 5 years old too.
Just disobedient. And they were just desperate. They were desperate. And we got to this section and outlined it. And they came and I think talked to us afterwards. What do we do? How do we do this? They did it. They were from out of town, and I think they were still in town. Still living in town. But they did it after the seminar to the little boy. And this is a little boy that's absolutely disobedient, everything I said. The kid turned on a dime. I mean, they could call him at the park, and he would stop what he was doing, run over. Yes, mother. Before he's flipping mom off, and he's just, just being hell. I mean, mom in tears by this kid's behavior. And in a matter of hours, she was very pregnant at the time, and church the next day, she walked in and just gave me a huge hug because I'd saved her life. This is where you feel that I don't know what the system is, but something's got to step in. Special visitation of the powers you are given. But you say, I'm doing it to deny them control. They have plotted their way to greater disobedience, accepting the way things were, the way I had done them, and I expected them to abide by that. Well, no, they're not gonna. And once they figure it out, they'll start undoing your world. So you've got to have something that undoes theirs. It's just a removal of control. It doesn't last long. It could last an afternoon. It could last a week if you got a real difficult child. The next thing you come across is the end of punishment. We always looked at 12 years old, that if you haven't achieved what you should achieve by 12, you're just beating a kid. And when there's sexual issues, you have a daughter, your father's spanking kids, you have son, your mom's spanking the boy, they're going through puberty, and it was a good time to quit. It was 12. My parents did that as well. We deserved spankings after 12. But by the time we got our kids to 12, they had maybe one spanking a year because we spanked them a lot when they were 3. Because you decrease in discipline, because and this is a measure, if you're exchanging maturity, that means each year that goes by, your kid's getting more mature. And what you have to do to achieve it, you have to do less of. You don't need to ride them. They're making their own decisions in a better way. You had something, Leslie?
It's in the next section.
Next section. We're talking about also the end of corporal punishment the talking to a child. After 12, they're a reasonable human being. And if you were good about having a household that was developed on reason, not on passion, you are able to talk with your child and point them to wisdom and obedience to God and the needful spiritual elements by the preaching of the gospel. You have, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the preaching of Christ. Okay? Romans 10. How can they call upon him whom they've not believed? How can they believe unless they hear? And how can they hear unless the preacher is sent? After 12, you're the preacher, if your kids haven't become Christians by that. If you've been doing a good job, they probably will be Christians by that. And then you're just dealing with a fellow Christian having the conversation about what they need to adjust in their life. And then you finally relinquish them to life's discipline. Because we all have, I don't know, maybe some of you have made some mistakes since you were an adult. Just thinking that may have happened. And we know that we got disciplined by the circumstance. The circumstance came home to us, and we got paying the ticket for the violation of law. And that's what you give your child over to. But they've earned the right to make their own decisions because they have the ability to govern themselves inside themselves. One thing about discipline is how mercy steps in, because you're not just teaching authority, you're teaching humility. You're not just teaching do it my way, but also God is a merciful God. Only Satan is the unmerciful. He just accuses. Don't be the person who's just there in their kid's life. There's some people for whom, and we're going to cover this with affection in the next section, but they only exist in the no. And so you've got to have a path of discovery, just like they lose control over your reign of terror, where they can also lose control over the fact that you're not going to spank them in a situation that they know they deserve a spanking. And you're not doing it because you've had a long day. That's not why. It's got to be mercy. It can't be I'm tired, or it wasn't that big a deal. As soon as you start slipping on your standards, not being merciful on your standards, mercy is them not receiving what they deserve. And when they know it, and you know it, and you say, whereas you're having the talk with them, you say, look, I really want to spank you, and you really deserve a spanking. Do you think you deserve a spanking? Yes, I do, Father. Well, I'm not going to spank you. I want you to, this is what mercy is. I just actually told my kids, this is mercy. I'm just not giving you what you deserve. And just letting them meditate with that. Now, that's not something that I think should happen very often, because I think they probably need the spankings more than they need the mercy. But using it's a good quality. If your discipline, as you note your discipline going on, if your discipline, this is something we've seen in a lot of parents, they are far more strict now that their kids are teenagers. That just means you failed. The parent failed when they had to get stronger in discipline as their kids got older. If there are elements where you're discovering that you were really the child in all of this, it's something that if you're that petulant parent that is always saying, Mom, Father, can we have a Coke? No. They always ask Father because it's going to be yes. Yeah, sure. Why not? We got Cokes. Knock yourself out. Yeah, it's bad for you. I don't care. Mom always goes, honey, you've had too much sugar. Dinner's in 2 hours. Not male reasoning, but we accept it. We encourage our wives to have standards. But if you're always a no, you're the child. If that's the only way it feels like you're in charge, is when you deny their will. It's just, I feel better because they can't have what they want. Someone somewhere is having a good time, and I've got to stop it because that's what Jesus or Satan would want. Because I think that's what Satan was guilty of, but that's just my own theories.
And also regarding saying no, as a mother, I remember days where things were going along really nicely. I'm getting my work done. I can hear the kids playing well together. And I just have this vision of this is how life should be, our family, we're all just here. And then one of the kids comes in and says, can we invite so-and-so over to play? Or can we go to this place? And it suddenly destroys this moment that is sounding so perfect and looking so wonderful. And so you're tempted to just say no, because you want it to stay the way it is. When actually there's really no reason why you shouldn't let your kid go do the thing that they want. Just be aware, ladies, moms, that sometimes the little perfect picture that's developing can change by you saying yes, and your kids will appreciate you.
The other aspect of this, and we didn't address it, but back at the beginning we talked about inertial forces, and one of them is passion. And an awful lot of parents, they know it's wrong to beat their children, but it's only when they feel like beating their children that they beat their children. Because they have no motivation to do it until they're angry. And if you're going to be that kind of sinner where you don't have control of how you do things, that you're not a person of principle, you could not serve a spanking cold, and I love to do that. It never hurts me more than it hurts you. I always say, this is going to hurt you much more than it hurts me. And I tell my kids, in fact, I enjoy this because they're falling apart for over nothing, over a little sting, because they lied to mom or something like that. And serving the justice cold is a greater signal of justice, that you're not just in feud with your children. And when they violated what you didn't want, you get so incensed that you smack them. And it keeps you from having bad behavior in how you discipline, what you use to discipline, what the procedures are, and how quickly it is done, and whether you restore them to the family at the end of the punishment you have assigned. You get to decide what the problem is. You get to decide what the nature of the punishment is. But once the nature of the punishment is accomplished, you have achieved the reconciliation, the punishment due. And they better not be treated as if they still had ruined your day by asking to go play with their friends. You know, they don't have to be punished more. That's why spanking is much better than grounding or, timeouts, because they just get to mull over their annoyance. I tell this story, and you probably heard it before, but my father always told it because it involved me and my grave sins against the family. And I don't know how old I was, but it was before 4th grade, because I know what house we were in. And my father had just painted the house, and white. And he took his kids outside of the house. He said, "Don't touch this side of the house. I'm going to work." Off he went to work. Came back driving into the driveway next to the house. There were 2 muddy handprints on the side of the house. And trotted his kids out there, and we all denied it. Then he went all forensic, matched our hands. Mine matched. So I had done what I was not supposed to. I had lied about it and caught. Now, I was also an artsy-fartsy kid. Now, even that early where I hadn't accomplished anything, they knew I was sort of they were following some of the trends in parental, got kids that are artistic. Sensitive, and spanking might traumatize them. So they had given me, because they were learning things too, that's 1962 maybe, they would give me a choice. Would you like a spanking, or do you want to be sent to your room? I said, go into my room. And I'll go off, draw pictures in my room. I'd have a great time in my room. Never felt any limitation by being in my room. And then at that situation with the muddy handprints, they had been going through this special circumstances for Evan, the weak-minded, and my dad said, "Do you want to go to your room or do you want a spanking?" I said, "I want a spanking." He said, "Do you want it hard or do you want it soft?" I said, "I want it hard." And this is early grade school. I was not cleansed by any of the discipline. I knew it wasn't adequate. And I needed to have a hard spanking for this obvious, almost intentional to get the spanking. I mean, 2 muddy handprints at eye level. So it was, my father always told the story about if you get the system right, you're really cleansing them. It's not too much, not too little. It's not adjusting for different crimes. Say, if you're going to deserve punishment, you're going to get 10. If you're going to get anything, you're going to get 10. In some situations where it's just a fussy little kid, sending them off to play in their room, it's not so much discipline. You're not saying you're grounded, not saying you're timeout. No, you're going to go play in your room. I don't want to be around you. You know, when you have a good attitude, you can come out. Where they have self-ministering what they need to take care of. I told you about the justice issues. That I have a quote on the side there of what matters matters. What ticks you off? You better do inventory on whether or not that's reasonable, just, right. If you go by righteousness standards, and this is something my father always operated on. They didn't tell me this, but I noticed it just looking back over the years. His commandments to us always agreed with our conscience. We knew it would be wrong for us to do that which he told us not to do, separately from him telling us. It didn't become wrong because he said. It was wrong. He agreed with it. Our conscience agreed with it. If we still did it wrong, we knew we were 2-1 wrong in that our conscience said Dad was right. Once you have laws that start trickling over into something that you don't think would be healthy for them. My parents were non-drinking, non-smoking, conservative Christians. And they knew at some point in my youth, my father asked me, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I said, smoke a big fat cigar. And he was a little, concerned. But he knew it was true. He knew I always wanted to smoke cigars. And I was just waiting for the freedom and the law in Christ to go do so. So the idea that my parents didn't say, even though they didn't smoke, and they were in the ministry, and they could misinterpret a scripture just as many as anybody, but they didn't draw lines that they knew the Bible didn't draw lines on. They didn't discipline me for smoking. They didn't discipline me for growing my hair long, because my father said, I know you want long hair. I was the only kid in my high school with long hair with my parents' blessing, because they knew to grant me what I wanted, even though they were culturally not in that category. They saw all the problems in the hippie culture in Ann Arbor, and they knew it would be far better to go along with what our conscience bore witness to. We knew that smoking wasn't wrong morally, and we knew that long hair wasn't wrong morally. Now, the last thing is more of a couple things. We have a quote from Psychology Today from 2012 about French kids not having ADHD. So much of them not having ADHD is because of the way French families are run. They're a godless culture, but they have a stern, correct, stable, directed family life with no kids doing whatever they want, having whatever way they're just, you're doing this and you're doing that. And they've watched, you can read it on your own time, but it's amazing how the things our culture struggles with are not because you got some disease called ADHD. It's just because you needed your butt whacked at some point. And the other thing is a poem that I have loved since I was little as my father quoted it to me. And it wasn't in our last, I had to go find a copy since the last seminar on this. And it's called The Patter of the Shingle. When the angry passion gathering in my mother's face I see, and she leads me to the bedroom, gently lays me on her knee, then I know that I will catch it, and my flesh in fancy itches as I listen for the patter of the shingle on my breeches. Every tingle of the shingle has an echo and a sting, and 1,000 burning fancies into active beings spring. And 1,000 bees and hornets neath my coattails seem to swarm as I listen to the patter of the shingle, oh so warm. In a splutter comes my father, who I'd supposed had gone, to survey the situation and tell her to lay it on. To see her bending o'er me as I listen to the strain played by her and by the shingle in a wild and weird refrain. In a sudden intermission, which appears my only chance, I say, strike gently, mother, or you'll split my Sunday pants. She stops a moment, draws a breath, and the shingle holds aloft and says, I had not thought of that, my son. Just take them off. Holy Moses and the angels, cast your pitying glances down, and thou, O family doctor, put a good soft poultice on, and may I with fools and dunces everlastingly commingle, if I ever say another word when my mother wields the shingle. Okay, we are at the end of lesson 3, lunchtime. Do we have directions, sir? Are there any questions, by the way? We don't know if we got the... Are there any before we... Becky has something. Hang on, she pull your wits together. You got to have a microphone first.
Curious about disciplining for fussiness. Did you guys do that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, where was that, I guess, line drawn, or where did you see that was necessary as opposed to just, hey, you're a bother to everyone here, go to your room?
Well, there are some things that the opportunity is trying to be annoying to you rather than merely stumping around being petulant. It's really a judgment call. You don't want to be around it. You got paths. It's not a yes or a no. Your family did not fail to succeed because you made the wrong choice about fussiness that one time in 2025. But in some ways, you probably do need to exercise physical punishment on fussiness so that they know what they're laboring to achieve in their room. A basic thing is not you're being punished, you got to stay in your room for 2 hours. No, you're going to the room and you can come out when you're happy. So they've got to govern themselves to an end that they know that the other side of this governance is going to be the pain that's going to come to me. You probably have to incorporate it at some point so that they know. And you can even talk to them about it after the fact, after you say, well, this is the kind of thing, little Johnny, that you'd get a spanking for, you know that. And I'm going to send you to your room because I want you happy. And if you can come out happy in a little bit and not be fussy, we've dodged the spanking. And then they go with a task on them. But it's going to be circumstantial too. Do you have the freedom to, you're at somebody else's house, you don't have a room to send them to.
If it's a younger child that you can't have that kind of conversation with, a little hand slap, and when I say little, I don't mean not painful, but not go into this whole business of taking off the diaper, and by that time, they don't know what they're getting it for, and they're too little to make the connection. But another thing I can remember doing is mimicking their fussing and saying, you're talking like this, mimic it, and then say, I want you to sound like this. And then whatever the noise they're making, you sound nice. If they can't say words, then you just, nice sounds. Instead of, you just try to communicate with them at their level. But yeah, use some degree of pain, some degree of example.
There are some things that, like with corporal punishment, where there is practical utensils, things that got whooped to them, not because it's whoop ass, but it's like a
Whoop, whoop.
yeah, like a lath of wood, that has some give. So you get more sting than you get. And you're talking about you swing through the butt, you keep your head down, you aim for the next county. That you get that worked out. One, so there's sort of a comic effort on your part. So you're going to enjoy your time with this, and that you know what you're going to set aside. You're not just scrambling to figure out what is my utensil, what spatulas do I use. We had ours labeled, and our kids would know where to go to fetch them when it was time to get their 10 whoopings. But those are you'll get a lot of suggestions from fellow parents of what they've used or tried. We had a guy in the community here years ago that was making the connect oar, and it was like a frat paddle, He learned some lessons about what kind of oak really actually worked.
And it was too heavy to really.
Yeah, we had one, but we didn't pass it on. So what?
Stephanie has a question.
Not a question, just a suggestion. The Lowe's recommended glue sticks. And
Yeah,
we've had
there's a lot of people glue
really
sticks there.
great
Nice
luck.
long ones, about that
The
long.
long
Yeah.
ones, yeah. And you can use 2 at a time
Not
if it's.
actually hot, but like not.
Yes. And they're gonna clank this out. All of it. Okay, we got the microphone down here for Abby.
It sounds like the Reign of Terror is something that you do for a specific amount of time. When do you determine that you should do the Reign of Terror? Because obviously you're giving spankings at other times as well, which is, you're presuming that your kid is being disobedient to a certain degree, whether or not you're doing the Reign of Terror or just normal discipline. When do you decide to do it, and when do you decide to be done with it and do normal? And how does normal look very different from the Reign of Terror?
Because the things you removed from the Reign of Terror on that last point are things you would normally explain to your child. You say, look, you lied to your mother. You deserve a spanking. You're going to get a spanking. At the end of it, you would, try to get things right. You're welcome back to the fellowship of the family, etc. You go through all the things that you're denying them in the Reign of Terror. They need to be confused. They know they did wrong. They know they're getting swatted, but they don't know. It's not jumping through hoops that they have used to manipulate the situation. How it's different is that they're creating an atmosphere and an aroma of their sinful control of the family. Usually, if you discipline correctly at the right times, it clears the air for a considerable time afterwards. They learn some lessons. They're joyful and they're happy, and then it's a while next day or so before they sin again. But if they're just challenging the system, you know that somehow, you can't spot how, but they've found a way to mark out territory of disobedience that they're going to continue doing in spite of the regular discipline you did.
It's the days they wake up and you go, what happened to you? Why are you a different child today? Those are the days you do
It's either demons or it's
And as soon as you find them obeying immediately, like little boy at the park running to his mom when she called him, then okay, we're done. The Reign of Terror worked.
So if normally I would ask Lawrence, do you want to pray afterwards? And he'll mostly say yes. Sometimes you don't do that on the Reign of Terror, but totally fine to do when you're not doing the Reign of Terror.
you don't want to have anything offered across the table that they could pick up as a negotiating ploy on your part, and they get to pick it up and go, okay, do I accept this? Do I reject this? Do I get to say no to the prayer? Well, give them the option. We're not praying. You're not. You're just getting punished without conversation. So it's the denial of them. My father called it sea lawyering because we were Navy, and with guys on board ship who learned how to argue cases that would occur on ship on invented laws of shipboard life. Well, we had become sea lawyers in our family, and Father, you remember, this is Doug Wilson and Evan Wilson operating on a full head of steam about how we were going to get out of this. and we could argue anything, and it wasn't good for family order. So I think that those sorts of things are, you don't necessarily presume you're going to have a reign of terror, but if you find stuff, this is unbearable. I can't seem to catch them enough times that I just got to take control out of the environment and anything to offer their circumstance.
Just to follow up on Abby's question, if you have chosen to move into a reign of terror territory and you get to a week and say this isn't changing anything, what ought a parent to be looking towards in how they're approaching it?
Well, it may be that a lot depends on how wise you were and when you did this, that if you let it go too long, a lot of children are disobedient to get attention from their parents that they haven't gotten, and they're finally getting attention from you. So they might not want to give up, even if it's spanking. They want, kind of perversely, but and some situations, my father's short booklet on saturation love, that when you realize that the problem is not them turning it into a mafia house, they're really needing your attention. You can turn it around to saturation love, where you're giving a lot of positive attention to the child, either in between, along with, so that they get everything fed the right degree by the right thing. So if they're being punished a lot without explanation, there's stuff between the punishments. It's not walking in and out of the bedroom. Excuse me. So during the rest of the day, saturation love is, sitting with them, hugging them, reading to them, giving them all the attention that you think they might be just a quart or two low on attention from parents. So Michaela has a question in the back.
So you were mentioning after the age of 12 how there's an element, a spiritual dimension to your sort of reasonable conversations with this reasonable child. Before that, in sort of points 1 through 6, do you practice any element of confession or apology during discipline time?
Good point. No, because I would, at some point in there before 12, when you're still punishing them, and it's a moral sin, not just shoes off in the house, you start to remind them, because you're a Christian household, that these are things that God cares about too. You've been punished by us for the sin in the household. You might want to straighten this out with God. It's up to you, but it's got to be, you don't want to try to discipline your child into the faith. You discipline the child, and they learn about right and wrong, about the health of right and wrong. And when a parent says, I want you to apologize to your sister right now, all you're going to get is hypocrisy. All you do is like, I'm sorry, I took it. And then what do? You can see it. You can see it on the surface. They're dishonest. They're doing it to not get another spanking, but they should get another spanking for that kind of gross sin, where they falsely said, I'm sorry. And I don't think it's wrong for you as a parent to say, you might want to consider, you really hurt your sister in this situation. You might want to consider getting it right with her. Just like getting it right with God. The other people that matter, your sister can't discipline you, and God is going to discipline you differently than I did. But you might want to consider getting it right with both of those people. But trying to make them do it, it's like saying thank you for the socks Grandma gave you at Christmas. You're not thankful. Don't make hypocrites out of your kids, even if they're still grotesquely unthankful about things. You can just talk to them about it, and you sort of work those quantities in as they're growing up. So finally, they know they've heard all these truths from you for 12 years about what's right to do and how to speak to people and what's polite. But a lot of cases, we know that politeness is even looked down upon because everybody knows it's fake. You're just saying thank you. You ever listen to the fast food people yelling? The order goes back, thank you. They hate each other. But Wendy's requires them to say thank you.